Democrats are in the wilderness. We know that, but what you might not realize is that it's getting worse every single day. It's really bad. The party needs a lot of help. They need a spark. They need somebody to help them out. Enter the Washington Post, who just made a list in their newspaper about the Democrats who make the most sense in 2028 to replace Donald Trump at the White House. And I guess I just didn't realize that it was this bad for Democrats. In just 24 days, Donald Trump has completely changed the mood of the country. And while that's happening, on the other side of the aisle, Democrats are so completely lost that more than 1,300 days away from the election, 45 months from the next presidential election, and the Washington Post wanted to inspire their readers by putting together a list of the best the Democratic Party has to offer. The 12 Democrats they see beating Republicans in 4 years, the very best. And the first name on their list, the first name that you read, Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. And I feel like we could just end the segment right here and roll commercials. The Washington Post, the most establishment legacy swampy document printed in the United States on a daily basis, thinks that John Fetterman might be the very best of the Democratic Party, the best that the Democratic Party has to offer the American people. This man right here, sweatshirt and all. Take a look.
To have all of his merchandise as part of his kind of empire from the show. All of it was manufactured right here in China.
I run on Roe v. Wade. Celebrates the demise of Roe v. Wade.
Send me to Washington, D.C. Take on to make sure I push back against work. To have this conversation to really just address the fact that I'm absolutely set to serve.
Okay. John Fetterman, in moments, very funny. But I think, honestly, I want to get to the bottom of this. I think Republicans only laugh at John Fetterman because he's a Democrat. 3 years ago, sad story, he had a stroke. And ever since then, he's gotten more and more MAGA as he's healed. But imagine this, Inauguration Day 2029. John Fetterman takes the oath of office earlier in the day. We now have President Fetterman, and he's wearing exactly what he wore to Donald Trump's inauguration 3 weeks ago, when it was 9 degrees in Washington. He had short pants on. Not even like khaki shorts. He had mesh shorts on with a ratty, nappy sweatshirt. He thought that that outfit matched the moment. It didn't. But the Washington Post thinks that John Fetterman might match the moment again for America in 4 years. And you might remember this moment from 8 months ago, the beginning of the end, or maybe the end of the beginning of Joe Biden's presidency.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, and I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
The best of the Democratic Party. Biden had dropped out of the race 2 weeks later. But I want you to imagine John Fetterman debating a Republican, literally any Republican. Doesn't matter who it is. All right. Drums. Next on the list, Kamala Harris, our incompetent former vice president, who has the one political attribute, can't be taught, you're born with this. No politician wants it. She's got it in spades, and that is that nobody likes her. And when she tries to make it better, she only makes it worse.
I love Venn diagrams. It's just something about those 3 circles and the analysis about where there is the intersection, right? So the importance of community banks is they are, as they are called, they're in the community.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? Here's the thing. Who doesn't love a yellow school bus, right? Can you raise your hand if you love a yellow school bus, right?
But wait a second, the Post has a plan. Maybe Kamala can hire a team to work with her over the next 4 years, teach her how to be likable. If only we could get Kamala to get back to who she really is and tell stories about her childhood. If only we could make Kamala more relatable.
I think it was my Uncle Freddie, you know, looked down and looked in the stroller, which was empty, and said, "Where's Kamala?" My mother would tell a funny story about how Like one day and I was fussing and so I'm fussing and fussing. It's much cuter when she would tell the story, but she'd say, so then she would look down at me and, Kamala, what do you want? What do you want? And I looked back up at her and I said, freedom.
Freedom. A sweet story. The problem is it's not her story. Turns out Kamala stole that story from Martin Luther King Jr., who told the exact same story in a 1965 interview in print when he said, quote, I will never forget the moment in Birmingham when a white police officer accosted a little girl 7 or 8 years old who was walking. What do you want? The little girl looked up at him straight in the eye and answered, freedom. F-W-E-E-D-O-M. That tells you everything you need to know about Kamala Harris right there. On paper, maybe. In reality, a Democratic DEI dream. But wait until you meet her. She's really something. She's like a politician that AI would create if you typed in female DEI Democrat. Kamala would come out the other side. Kamala couldn't get the American people to like her for 106 days over the summer. Imagine her campaigning for 2 years. And Pete Buttigieg. Remember we all had to learn that? He's on the list. Of course he's on the list. He made the list because Mayor Pete, is historic. And when I think about historic figures throughout American history, especially historic first, George Washington, Neil Armstrong, Mayor Pete always comes to mind. And if he doesn't, the legacy media will remind you of that fact every single day.
If confirmed by the Senate, Buttigieg would make history as the nation's first openly gay cabinet secretary.
If confirmed, you will be the first openly LGBTQ secretary in U.S. history.
When he was sworn in, he became the first openly gay cabinet secretary to be confirmed by Congress.
Former South Bend, Indiana mayor and presidential candidate is the first openly gay person to be confirmed by the Senate for a cabinet post.
Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful, historic. Who can forget the time that Mayor Pete, to prove to all of us just how green he is, had those big, strong Secret Service agents stop their V8 Suburban, take his bike out of the back of the car, here's the video, so he could bike by the waiting press at the White House. He had those big, strong agents take that bike out. He put on his little helmet and he biked a whole city block all the way to the White House. And he proved to everyone just how serious he was about fighting climate. Our first ever gay cabinet secretary. But nowhere does the Post mention that, to Mayor Pete, everything on planet Earth is also racist.
A bus carrying mostly black and Puerto Rican kids to a beach, or that would have been, in New York was designed too low for it to pass by. But that obviously reflects racism that went into those design choices.
Freedom is being impaired because of racism in this country. Not just directly, but through our healthcare system.
We see a lot of racial disparities. Black and brown Americans, tribal citizens, and rural residents much more likely to lose their lives, whether it's in a car or as a pedestrian being hit by a car. There are a lot of reasons related to discrimination.
So we've answered 2 questions tonight. If you're wondering why the Washington Post is losing readers, this is why. If you're wondering why Democrats lost in November, this is another example, and we'll continue to make our way through this list. Next up, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Not a lot of people know Josh Shapiro. A white Jewish man, reminds me a lot of one former Democrat president. And don't worry if you don't know who Shapiro is. Listen to him here and let me know if he reminds you of a former Democrat president. Sounds just like him.
You could not have a clearer contrast between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And let me tell you something, he's pretty afraid. Y'all see, he's backing out of the debate now. He's afraid to stand toe-to-toe with our vice president. Let me tell you something, I love this guy. Tim is the kind of person who should be in politics.
Josh Shapiro reminds a lot of people of Barack Obama because Barack Obama inspired a lot of Democrats. Josh Shapiro is one of them, and there's nothing wrong with that. Happens all the time in politics. John F. Kennedy inspired generations of Democrats to comb their hair the exact same way and do things behind the scenes that he became famous for. Think about Gary Hart, but think about John Kerry, Dan Quayle, Bill Clinton, of course. The only problem, with the exception of Bill Clinton, for Democrats is that none of those men on screen right there ever got elected because people don't vote for the knockoff. In politics, they want the real thing. Authenticity, and Barack Obama is never coming back. And neither is Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who's next on the Washington Post list. Gretchen Whitmer, who thought this would help Kamala in November and then help her intern 4 years later.
Many are calling Kamala Zoo. Yeah. Cheers. Okay, cheers.
Didn't help, and they didn't finish the beer. By the way, if you're a politician and you're watching right now and you're thinking about running for higher office and you go to a bar to try to make yourself seem like a regular guy or gal and you order a beer or a cocktail or a Jack and Coke or whatever it is that you like when it comes to libations, always finish the drink. It comes down to authenticity. If you're not going to finish the drink, don't order the drink and have some campaign staffer pay for the drink. Gretchen Whitmer is the perfect example of what someone thinks about a politician before they really start thinking about the politician. Even the people of Michigan, when they were asked about Gretchen Whitmer, the answer that they got most was okay. She's okay. And just like Kamala Harris, the second people actually started paying attention to Kamala, guess what we got? She's okay. That's the best you're going to get when it comes to Gretchen Whitmer and Kamala Harris. But according to the Post and their big, busy newspaper, this is the best of the Democrat Party. Rounding out the list, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, I'm serious, who completed the most inauthentic presidential ticket we've ever had back in November. Authenticity is part of the Trump magic. The Donald Trump you see every single day is the real Donald Trump, and people are almost instinctively attracted to that, like a magnet. So what do Democrats do? They bring in this guy.
Tim Walz is headlining a voter engagement event tonight with black men. Who better to connect with young black men than Tim Walz? Tim Walz said, like the American people, I talk like they do. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're a huge liar, like all politicians are. I don't care, by the way. I've always said this about politics. They're all going to lie. They're politics. It's what they lie about.
Do you remember Tim Walz in that orange jacket? Brand new jacket, literally still tags on this jacket, pheasant hunting. What's more scary is the fact that Kamala's top advisors, a couple weeks before an election, that we were told was close, it wasn't. They thought this was a good idea. It also wasn't. And what Democrats in the Washington Post do not get is just how truly unpopular they are. A poll came out last week that found that the majority of Americans say the Democratic Party does not share their priorities. So how does the establishment respond to that reality, the reality that their own voters don't like them and don't like their policies? They roll out the same tired names thinking somehow it's going to be different. Another poll that came out last week on the very same day. If the 2028 election were held today, who would you vote for? A majority of Democrats said Kamala Harris, which proves my thesis that this party is completely lost. And I'm not convinced that anything is going to help that between now and November 2028.